Special thanks to Tokyo Treat and Sakurako for sponsoring today's video. Alright, it's time for another edition of our Klub Outside Q&A Roundup series. As always, Kubo takes and answers a variety of questions directly from fans over on his personal Q&A platform, and then we try to dissect those answers right here on the channel and see if there's anything of value to be found among them. Now, a lot of the time, Kubo's comments are a mix of light-hearted chatter and fluff, but sometimes we are given real, genuine insight into the story and world of Bleach that for whatever reason simply wasn't found in the original material. And as always, I'm not looking at every single answer he's ever given, nor even necessarily looking at them in chronological order. Mostly I'm trying to curate the answers that I find to be the most interesting and to have the most value, and then bring them to you. And so, speaking of which, this time the questions revolve around the topic of the Quincy afterlife, the power of Ichibei's Bankai, recovering the Reishi of a dead captain, and more. A huge thank you to Tumblr user Wheelsome for providing the translations to the questions and answers. It is a big help, and there's a link in the description to where you too can find them, so make sure to go and check them out. Right, on with the latest roundup. We're going to begin with the topic of the Quincy afterlife, the realm of dead Quincy's, because, well, I'm pretty sure Kubo's talked about this before, hasn't he? Before we continue, if you like what you see here on the channel, if you enjoy Bleach content like this every single week, consider supporting it by visiting my Patreon, the link to which you can find in the description below, and consider becoming a patron over there for as little as $1 a month to get your name in the credits of every single video, just like all of these supporters are doing. It's greatly appreciated and it does help me out an awful lot. And speaking of supporting the channel, before we get started, first a word from today's sponsor. This month, Tokyo Treat and Sakurako are whisking us away to two of Japan's most famous locations. Akihabara, a place I've always wanted to visit and one that's very relevant to this channel's interests, and Okinawa, the sun-drenched coastal paradise that's probably almost as hot as it is here. Right, let's dive in. Tokyo Treat is an exclusive monthly snack box packed to the brim with a selection of fun and limited edition sweets. This time, as part of the Akiba Snack Quest theme, we're visiting the streets of Tokyo's vibrant Akihabara district, the world-famous home of all things anime and gaming. And of course, the snacks are designed to reflect the eclectic, energetic, digital nature of Akihabara, featuring cookies and cream Kit Kats, a candy Kara microphone, sour paper candy, and more. Yeah, so there's a lot of interesting stuff in the Tokyo Treat box this month. Here is the aforementioned candy Kara microphone, for example. But as always, we're going to crack open the Kit Kats first. Cookies and cream is a tried and true flavour that I really enjoy, so this is going to go down well. As expected, there's not really a lot I can say about this one. It's a total winner for me as far as I'm concerned. These kind of flavours are always going to work for me. Honestly, that's a lovely Kit Kat, very creamy. I really wish we had this flavour here in the UK, to be honest, and that's the benefit of Tokyo Treat. Like I said, there's a ton of really weird, out there stuff this time in the Tokyo Treat box, which I love to get. I am very curious about this Nomu Nomu jelly drink, which is apparently cider flavoured. I'm curious to see what this is going to be like. And interestingly, it's managed to stay cold pretty well. It's actually just like you're drinking jelly. That's really really strange, but as someone who likes jelly, that's actually really nice. That's very unusual and exactly the kind of snack I want to see popping up in something like Tokyo Treat. Meanwhile, Sakurako is here to show you a different side of Japan. Okinawa, a tropical wonderland known for its stunning coastline and glittering oceans, which is about as far away from the concrete jungle of Tokyo as you can get. And as part of the Flavors of Okinawa theme, the snacks included are emblematic of Okinawa itself, and include Okinawa pineapple jelly, Okinawa mango pie, and some sanpin tea to name a few. Plus, the month's tableware item this time is an Okinawa Kozara plate. First on the docket, even more jelly, let's do this. This is the pineapple jelly this time. It should be suitably tropical, especially for the weather that I'm enduring right now. I absolutely love the way these little pots look, a very satisfying texture on them. Let's see what they're all about. We've had a lot of jelly today. That one does taste very strongly of pineapple, which is one of my favourite fruits. So yeah, that's really nice, and you actually get quite a few in there as well. And then the last thing we're going to look at is this Benny Emo pie, which comes in this frankly really lovely packaging. Let's hope it's as nice as it looks. There we go, we've got a very sweet little pie here. Let's give it a try. So according to the booklet, the purple filling is in fact purple sweet potato, which is apparently popular in Okinawa. And don't forget, these booklets are more than just cultural touchstones, they also include vital allergen information, so you can be sure ahead of time what it is you're actually eating. But that's it for July's boxes, and I've got to say I'm really impressed with these ones. A big thanks to Tokyo Treat and Sakuriko for supporting the channel as always. If you'd like to pick up either of these boxes for yourself and experience some of the taste of Japan from the comfort of your own home, then visit the link in either the description or the pinned comment down below and use my code TOMO for an exclusive offer of $5 off of your first order. Not only do you save money by doing that, but you help support the channel at the same time. Thanks everyone, and as always, enjoy. Alright, so I knew that Kubo had spoken of a Quincy afterlife on his Q&A before, but actually I thought it was a little more recently. In fact, we covered it on this series over a year ago, which is quite surprising. Time really does fly, apparently. Now, back then, Kubo was asked whether or not Masaki and Kane went to the Soul Society, and if Quincy in general go to a different place when they die. In typical Kubo fashion, he replied in a pretty cryptic manner, simply saying that deceased Quincy do indeed go to a different place entirely. And of course, that led to all manner of speculation. What kind of an afterlife could it be? What kind of connection might it have to Yhwach, if any, considering a piece of the Sternritter's souls return to their king upon their death? Does that affect their ability to move on at all? Of course, we know that the Quincy are an outlier when it comes to the cycle of rebirth, something that was emphasised in Core 3 of the Thousand Year Blood War arc anime. Supposedly, when he split the primordial world into the three worlds that we know today, the Soul King forsook the Quincy race by essentially making them an anomaly that now no longer fits into the established status quo of the world. And it seems like that extends to their passage to the afterlife as well. Well, Kubo has now elaborated on the idea of a Quincy afterlife a little further, and actually included some, I'd say, rather interesting details that I didn't expect to see. So, he was asked the following question, which reads: Dead Quincy's go to a place different from the Soul Society, but is there a world for them like the Soul Society? If so, I was wondering if Uryu wouldn't be able to reunite with Ichigo and the others in the Soul Society after death. But is it possible to travel between the two realms? Alright, so this reader is asking quite a lot, but it's a good question and one that I'm intrigued by for sure. I like that they've clearly read Kubo's previous answer as well and used that as a springboard. This is directed specifically as a follow-up to it, as it kind of means that Kubo can't really just retread old ground. But they also field a good point. It's not something I'd ever really considered, but it would be a bit depressing for Uryu to know that he will never see his friends again once he dies, while they'll all just be hanging out with the Shinigami. And on the flip side, it's also going to be more than a bit awkward for Uryu when he goes to the Quincy afterlife and ends up with all the Sternritter that he betrayed. That conversation with Hashwolf is going to be a fun one, I imagine. To be fair, Uryu's probably going to have to get in line, as it's already going to be awkward enough around Hashwolf and Basby as it is. Obviously I'm being a bit facetious, but at the same time, the Quincy as a lone race, when you think about it, they're not going to be that big in the grand scheme of things, not compared to the combined masses of souls of every human, hollow, and whatever else ends up in the Soul Society. But once again, the Quincy do appear to be ostracised from the rest, and it's not hard to see why they might have a chip on their proverbial shoulder. Anyway, Kubo responded by saying, yes, there is. The two realms are connected at a place close to hell, so it's not that there is absolutely no means to travel between them. And just like that, we could now see deceased Sternritter turn up in the Hell arc. And no, I'm not joking either. Originally it didn't seem possible, as why would they go to the Soul Society? And then Kubo kind of doubled down on that by revealing that yes, they do go somewhere else, but now, well, Kubo's just opened up another can of worms with this one, in the increasingly high stack of opened up worm cans revolving around the Hell arc. And indeed, one can't help but think his now fairly commonplace mentions of Hell feel a little bit like purposeful teases these days. In reality, though, what does this mean? What does this look like? What's the relevance of the location being close to hell. It feels like a fairly big deal to me that there's just a whole other realm out there in the spiritual world that we've never heard of, let alone seen. Also, on top of that, Kubo notes that the two realms, so the Soul Society and this unknown Quincy realm, are connected at a place close to hell. So that means, along with this new unknown Quincy realm, there's another new place to take note of as well. Whatever this connecting point is between the Soul Society and the Quincy realm, that's also apparently close to hell. What kind of place could this be? A sort of no man's land in the middle? A specified meeting point? Have Shinigami and Quincy ever met there before? This definitely, if I can get conspiratorial for a second, this definitely sounds like a backdoor means of getting some Stern Ritter to return in the Hell arc, I'm just saying. I could totally envision a subplot where a party of Shinigami meet with a party of Quincy at this connecting point, perhaps because it is being threatened by Hell since Hell is apparently so close. It's kind of interesting hearing Kubo talk about Hell like this, in regards to its proximity to other places, because we've never really been given any sort of reference point for Hell's location at all. You know, when you think about the structure of Bleach's universe, I think I could fairly easily draw a rough guide to how everywhere connects. The world of the living, the Dangai, the Garganta, Waco Mundo, even the likes of the Schattenbereich. But Hell has always just kind of been there, lingering somewhere in the background. And I guess it makes sense that we wouldn't know where it is or where it fits into the overall cosmology because, well, Hell has literally never been relevant in the manga until the Hell chapter, to the point where its absence was sometimes pretty conspicuous. And I remember, way back in the day, people wondered if Kubo had forgotten about the concept entirely. Another thing that makes Hell peculiar is that it isn't one of the three worlds that was split out by the Soul King. It has existed since the primordial world was a thing, maybe even before, if that's possible. Was there a reason Hell wasn't affected by the split? Perhaps even the Soul King himself had no power over it, but why would that be? Anyway, we're getting a bit off track. The truth is that there isn't much to glean from this, but it is very interesting all the same. It feels to me like a pretty big lore drop, but one that's still quite obfuscated for now, and one that brings about a lot of new questions with it. I mean, why is there a Quincy-specific afterlife in the first place? How did that come about? How was that made? Who made it? Going back to Rayo, could it be that he made the Quincy a realm of their own, and so technically they weren't forsaken after all? Speaking of which, where did this realm come from? If it presumably wasn't part of the split, that would also mean that it's not a part of the primordial world either. So, similarly to Hell, is it therefore as ancient as Hell, assuming that Hell is ancient? And does that mean it's existed for longer than the Soul Society, maybe? Also, literally, how are the Soul Society and the Quincy realm connected? Is it just by the Dangai again? Why is it that they are specifically connected to this one location that happens to be close to Hell? Again, it kind of feels like these are quite big questions, existential questions, to which we'll probably, Hell arc or no, not get any answers. But it's fun to wonder about, and in a sense, the known Bleach universe just got that bit bigger. Whether Kubo decides to ever explore it, of course, we won't know for now. Before we continue, if you're enjoying today's video and you haven't yet hit subscribe to stay up to date with more Bleach content like this every single week, consider doing so today. It does help me out a lot. And for you, it's free, it's easy to do. Just hit that button down below and help push us on our path to 300,000 subs. I do greatly appreciate it. Now, this next question honestly feels tailor-made for me, as I've always been a little skeptical of Ichibei Hyosubei's Bankai, Shirafude Ichimonji. Not of its power, of course, no, that is irrefutable. It is one of the most broken Bankai in the series, as you would rightly expect. But I've always found it weird that Shirafude Ichimonji, due to how it works and what it does, is one of the only Bankai, maybe the only Bankai I can think of in Bleach that seems to actively require the Shikai to be used first before using the Bankai. Looking at every other Bankai, they can all be activated right from the get-go, if necessary, with no prior setup required, and they will achieve the full result. And in fact, many characters do exactly that. After all, most Bankai are just a bigger, stronger, oftentimes blown out version of their Shikai ability. Shirafude Ichimonji is different, or at least that's how it seemed. Ichibei's Shikai, Ichimonji, transforms his huge calligraphy brush, swapping out the brush head for a blade, but said blade splashes black ink around with every swing. Anything the black ink covers loses its name and all power associated with it. And then, from there, Ichibei activates his Bankai, which removes the blade, allowing a stream of white ink to flow from the top of the brush instead. With this white ink, Ichibei then writes a new name upon that which Ichimonji blotted out, and thus transforms his target completely, giving them an entirely new identity with which comes wholly new properties. So, in order to use Shirafude Ichimonji's name-writing ability, Ichibei first needed to use his Shikai to black out his target's name. And I always found that unusual, not bad, but it definitely seemed to stick out to me, and this reader appears to feel the same way, asking Kubo the following question. Shirafude Ichimonji allows a new name to be bestowed on what has been blackened by Ichimonji. Is it necessary for the target to first be covered in Ichimonji's ink? Or can Ichibei use his Bankai's ability directly without going through his Shikai? To which Kubo replied, Shirafude can use the abilities of both Ichimonji and those of Shirafude Ichimonji. Regarding the ability to bestow a name, the activation procedure is as follows. First, cover the target with Ichimonji's black ink, then bestow a name upon it using Shirafude's white ink. Well, we knew that last part already, but I'm pretty sure Kubo is hammering home the fact that yes, someone has to have had their name blotted out by the black ink first, or else the white ink of Shirafude simply won't work. But this is a good answer from Kubo that I think really clarifies the extent of Ichibei's Bankai. And while it would be, I think, easy to look at this and think this is another example of the question simply leading Kubo to an answer, this one, in my opinion, actually makes a lot of sense. It's interesting to think about the logistics of how this would work, because once Shirafude Ichimonji is activated, the top of the brush completely opens up, allowing the white ink to spill out. If Ichibei wanted to access the Shikai's powers instead, would that stream of white ink simply turn black? If that was the case, it kind of feels like it would be a superior version of his Shikai, and why wouldn't you just use that all the time? Or instead, would the blade reappear in its original spot? Again, like I said, I think the reason why Kubo explained how bestowing a name works in his answer is to emphasize the fact that a name can only be blotted out with the black ink, and only be written with the white. So there would have to be a switch in there somewhere of the two colors, all while using Bankai. But actually, I think he also emphasized that fact to highlight that the name of Ichibei's Bankai really is two halves of the same whole, Shirafude and Ichimonji. And of course, names have power, something absolutely central to Ichibei's character. So it makes sense to me that when he releases Shirafude Ichimonji that he can use power associated with either name. Now I wonder if that's something specific to him, because he has such a power over names that he can draw out whatever he needs to, or if technically any Shinigami could do this. For example, if Byakuya was skilled enough, would he be able to separate Senbon Zakura and Kageyoshi to utilize different abilities with each name? Maybe Kageyoshi is where Bankai-specific abilities like Senkei and Gokei come from, since of course he can only utilize his Bankai by adding that name on. Either way, this is cool and kind of closes a loop that I had regarding Shirafude Ichimonji's inherent usefulness. Alright, so we don't have to spend too long on the final two topics today, but I thought they were interesting enough to take a look at. First up, Kubo was asked the following question, which reads: when a captain of the Soul Society, or an Arankar with equivalent spiritual pressure, Reiatsu, dies in the world of the living, what happens to their spiritual particles, Reishi? Are they automatically drawn into hell? Do they disperse in the world of the living, where the concentration of Reishi is so low, where the concentration of Reishi is low? Or can they confer power to living beings who possess the necessary predisposition? Honestly, it's another good question, and this is something else that's come about thanks to the new lore reveals as of the Hell chapter. In that chapter, Kyoraku reveals the existence of something called Spirit Class, essentially the density of a Shinigami's Reiatsu within their Reishi that's decided by how powerful they are, effectively allowing them to easily categorize the Shinigami themselves on an ascending scale from 20th to 3rd class and above. So Kyoraku reveals that ordinary officers are generally floating around 20th class, while your average vice captain is at 5th or 4th class. Meanwhile, anyone greater than 3rd class is captain level, and that seems to be a general blanket rule. I would assume this goes for anyone captain class, not literally just the captains. So Renji, by the end of the Thousand Year Blood War arc, for example, is almost certainly Spirit Class 3 or higher, despite being a vice captain. Anyway, Kyoraku goes on to reveal that when a Shinigami dies, their body turns into Reishi and is reclaimed by the soil of the Soul Society. However, anyone with a spirit class of 3 or above has Reishi too dense to be reclaimed, hence the need for the Konso Reisai ritual. But of course, Kyoraku only speaks of Shinigami who die in the Soul Society. And thinking back, I'm pretty sure every major Shinigami to have been killed so far has died in the Soul Society. Even the likes of Nemu, who is killed in Varvelt, technically dies within the bounds of the Soul Society. I guess Tosen technically dies in the world of the living, but his body, or what was left of it, was actually in the fake Karakura town, so it would have been transported back to the Soul Society anyway. On the flip side, Gin dies in the real Karakura town, but that's actually in the Soul Society at that point in time anyway. But Kubo replied to the question, simply saying, recovering those spiritual particles is one of the duties of the Hicho Tai, part of Squad 2. So while not the most in-depth answer, it's still pretty cool and makes sense, with Squad 2 likely capable of moving fast and undetected. It's not explained how they retrieve said particles or what they do with them afterwards. Presumably, if it's a Shinigami, they take them back to the Soul Society to then perform the Konso Reisai. The question also highlights the Arankar, which is interesting to me as we should technically already know how it works for Hollows in regards to hell. But that's only if they were an evil person in life. If an Arankar dies, and their, dominant soul was an evil human, they will then go to hell, as we see with Shrieker. I mean, he was just a regular Hollow, but same deal. If they weren't an evil human, however, then we might find ourselves in this situation where their Reishi is left to linger. Multiple Fraxion die in the real world, but we have no idea if their Reiatsu was too dense or not to dissipate. And as for the Shinigami, again the question asks whether or not their spiritual particles would be automatically drawn to hell. That's not going to be the case, because the only reason they go to hell in the first place is because of the Konso Reisai ritual. It's not a thing that just happens, the Shinigami have been actively sending them to hell, obviously unknowingly. Finally, I thought this one was pretty cool, a nice quick one to wrap things up with. Kubo was asked the following question. When Roid Lloyd copies another person, does his Vollständig still get a halo and wings? To which Kubo replied, if he uses his Vollständig, then yes, they do. That's kind of cool. Again, it makes sense, I guess, though if Roid, and presumably Lloyd as well, were to copy a Shinigami, like how Lloyd copies Kenpachi, that would then mean he can use two power sets at the same time, a Shinigami's and a Quincy's. I guess it's not too dissimilar to when the Sternritter stole Bankai, and so of course we're using an inherently Shinigami power, although Bambietta of course does make a point of saying that she couldn't use her Vollständig while she was holding on to the stolen Bankai, whereas here with Royd and Lloyd, maybe they can freely use both at the same time. The idea of seeing Kenpachi with a Vollständig is both really weird and cool to imagine, though, I have to admit. It also kind of implies that whatever the two of them choose to become, it's kind of like they are just wearing a skin over the top of their usual selves, a skin that still has access to all of their original Quincy powers. It's a shame the Lloyd brothers were just two of the many Sternritter whose Vollständig were never revealed, though. But alright, that's it for this installment of the Klub Outside Q&A Roundup series. As always, I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you took something of value away from it as well. Let me know your thoughts on the topics this time. How do you feel about this new Quincy realm in the afterlife where dead Quincy go that supposedly connects to a specific place near hell, which then also links them to the Soul Society? I'd love to know your thoughts on that. Seems like a pretty big lore drop to me. And let me know your thoughts on the truth about Ichibei's Bankai, the fact that he can use Shikai and Bankai at the exact same time. Is that specific to him, or could everyone technically do that again? I'd love to know your thoughts on all of these topics down below, so do please let me know. Alright everyone, once again, thank you so very much for watching. Consider hitting subscribe down below. Help us reach 300,000 subs if you enjoyed this video and you want to see more Bleach content just like it every single week. And of course, check out the Patreon as well. Support me over there if you want to help channel. It's greatly appreciated and crucially is making a huge difference. So thank you all so very much. Alright guys, until next time, I'll catch you later and I'll see you then.